Welcome back to Latin Business Today. Dave Torromeo here with a great new guest, Freddy Rolón from ESPN, more specifically ESPN Deportes. They're about to celebrate their 20th year, if you can believe that. That's amazing. Congratulations on that. Freddie, welcome.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate it.
Yes. Tell us a little bit about you and your background.
Dave, I'm from Puerto Rican parents, but born in New York City, the
Nice.
Bronx. About 5.5 blocks, depending on how you count it, because I used to cut through the park away from Yankee Stadium. And basically grew up in the city, went to Wesleyan University, spent some time in a nonprofit consulting company before going to business school at Dartmouth, Tuck School of Business, where I found myself meeting a couple of executives from Disney and ESPN, and found my way into an internship between my first and second year in business school at ESPN. And then, luck and fortune and hard work kind of took over, and I've been here at ESPN pretty much since graduation, coming up on years now. So
I'm sorry, how many years, Fred?
it'll be 20 years
You'll
this
be there.
summer.
Okay, the whole, oh wow. Yeah, good for you. So, okay, clearly you're much brighter than I am. Wesleyan and Dartmouth Business School, so we won't go there. But that's great. Congratulations on a fine academic career, which I like to touch on because, as I mentioned before we got on, I run the Sport Business Management Master's program at Manhattanville College, and so that's a very important information for me to hear that, and obviously tie into the sports. So you're by the way, I took a trip to Puerto Rico. I don't know when the last time you were there with my family. I have two grown children. A couple of years ago, before the bad hurricane, but we loved it. We just love Puerto Rico. Do you get there much?
I wish I got there more often. I haven't been there since pandemic.
Yeah.
But my parents are from Ponce and Salinas, which are southern part of the island. The last time we were up there, we spent a lot of time just kind of touring the island. It was the first time my kids got to go, so it was very special to kind of see the island through their eyes.
Nice.
It's changed a lot since the first time I went. I think I was 4 years old the first time I went to Puerto Rico. But so interesting, such a bilingual, kind of like bicultural world. Haven't had the opportunity to travel to Mexico, Argentina, a few other Latin America countries. Puerto Rico is so unique in how tied to the US it is.
Right.
But still having its own kind of distinctive culture. But the more I could get out there, I'd love it. I just haven't had the opportunity.
All right. I'm changing my background for a split second here, only because I know you must be.
That's not the right background, man.
Listen, you gotta be true to your. So it's like in my DNA, right? So I had to tweak you with that one. So that's why when you go up in Long Island, my dad was a Yankee fan, but we went to Shea, so that's enough of that stuff. So tell me about what's going on at ESPN with this great anniversary, and congratulations on that.
Well, I should have probably mentioned when I was an intern, I was here when we were about to launch ESPN Deportes. So we're about, this weekend will mark the 20th anniversary of the launch of our ESPN Deportes network. And we're taking it as an opportunity to really celebrate all the work we've kind of done and kind of our touch point with Hispanic fans in the US. So we've got a couple of different ways of celebrating it. We're doing some things internally with our employees, number one, but two, we have a special on the 7th. It'll be on ESPN2 in English and ESPN Deportes in Spanish. So we're looking at the past 20 years from the perspective of different people. So not necessarily just our perspective, but sometimes fans, sometimes the players themselves, coaches, announcers, people that were there in the stadium, et cetera, and just kind of looking at the last 20 years of Hispanic sportsdom, if you will.
Yes.
So that'll be there. We also have a feature on Danny Garcia, who's obviously a prominent Latina in sports. She helped launch the XFL. She's super involved in now the kind of unified football league between USFL and XFL. So we take a look at her story and where she is kind of in life, and use that a little bit as a prism as to like the US Hispanic experience in sports. And so though there's another feature that we have that I think is actually really interesting. It focuses on a softball team in the Yucatan, and it's these female softball players, and it's the story about how they kind of unite around sports, but also at the same time have to kind of fight a little bit about, misogynist and maybe some stereotypical ideals that are in the town about what they should play, what they should be paying attention to instead of softball. So it's a very interesting story that's really at that intersection of kind of sports culture, and kind of society too. So that one will be also be played sometime this month on ESPN Deportes.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love how ESPN celebrates their history in this way, because we had George Bodenheimer several times back in the days when he was president of ESPN speak in our program, and he was explaining how the whole 30 for 30 came about, and they didn't want to be too kind of over the top with the celebration, but they also wanted to honor the network, and that was just a great. Obviously, those 30 for 30s are now what. How many are there? I don't know.
They're their own brand, and they continue to this day, right? Like they started as a celebration of a 30th anniversary,
right?
Still going,
Yeah,
and
still
so
going. Yeah,
it's a lot of good stuff, and we hope that part of what we've been trying to do in these last few years from ESPN Deportes is, ESPN Deportes started off as a Spanish language network. But then I think as we recognize between how we serve fans on ESPN and how we serve fans on ESPN Deportes, that there's an overlap and an in between with a lot of bilingual fans, and bicultural fans. And so a lot of what work we've been doing in the last few years has kind of also been targeted at really the US Hispanic experience and how it's distinct and how it actually overlaps, not just with stories that might be from the country of origins, but stories that happened here in the US, right? For people who were born here, they just happen to come from these cultures, and how that sometimes intersects with past generations, parents, grandparents, et cetera, who have a much different cultural foundation, maybe in a country outside of the US. And so some of that has really come together for us, not just content, but actually in the organization and kind of the people working on everything behind the scenes.
Very interesting. Can you share any numbers with us, like viewership and how it's grown over the years?
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately what we've seen over the years, and I would have to like go back and get you some real detail, Dave, but what we've seen is a steady growth in Hispanic viewership, not just in like Spanish language, but across all our different platforms. So for instance, we see a heavy amount of engagement on ESPN Plus in Spanish for our La Liga games, as an example. Steady rise in digital performance from our .com and our app. And so what we've seen is just kind of a steady growth and consistent growth amongst the population in pretty much every facet of what we do. That kind of makes sense if you think about the population and how it's kind of grown alongside the overall US population. But we're not necessarily like distinctively we see is these guys are Hispanics are passionate sports fans, and they're continually coming. And what we're trying to do is just get smarter about maybe some non-traditional sports that we haven't covered in the US that are more important. So you see more soccer coverage, for instance, on our English language platforms. That's always existed on the Spanish language. It's been the core of what we serve the Spanish language fan with. But on the English side, we've become more sophisticated, and we've become a little bit more integrated in terms of how we approach it.
Okay. And let's go back to you for a second now. If you could be more specific, like your role, your title, and things of that nature.
So I'm the head of digital content and audience expansion. I oversee all of our like digital editorial content teams. So not here, just here in the US, but also in our different like regional headquarters. So you could think Brazil, Buenos Aires, Mexico, the UK, Australia. We even have some people in the Philippines and Asia, et cetera. So that also encompasses our ESPN Deportes business, our stats and information group, which really supplies all kind of the stats and analysis that powers all the content across ESPN, not just digitally, but linearly as well. And then the fantasy and betting content team. So all the kind of team focused on providing fantasy information and betting information across our platforms roll up into our group.
Very interesting. And so the areas of growth going forward for Deportes, where do you see it going, say in the next 10, 20 years?
Next 10, 20 years, you're asking me, I mean, I wish I had that like for the next 5 years. Let's start there.
Yeah,
Right?
okay. Yeah, tell me where the stock market's going to be in a year, right?
If I could start predicting 10, 20 years,
I
I'd
got
probably
you.
have
Right.
like a different job. But I do think, well, two things, right? Like we're at the crux of a lot of what I'll say is like user behavior change. And we're seeing kind of like this balance that we have to have between our linear business, our direct to consumer business, and that's very real for our Deportes business as well. And so I think we're trying to be proactive about how we reach Hispanics across the board and really think through in a way that I think is more about parallel paths, as Jimmy likes to say, right? Like just making sure that we're nimble and able to kind of react to the audience. Because I don't think the audience behavior that we see today will be stagnant, I guess is the answer to it, right? Like we're in the middle of the trend. And so I think some of it will evolve. There's new technology that I anticipate we're probably not seeing today, whether it's AI, whether it's different social platforms. Like there are things that are going to come our way, which is why I say beyond 5 years, I think it's hard to predict, right? But what I know is as long as we create the most compelling content or on top of the most, like I guess relevant news stories there from a sports perspective with the sports people care about, we can pivot pretty much anywhere as long as that core stays strong, right? Because that's actually what people are looking for, regardless of platform. However they consume sports at its core, that's what they're looking for. So as long as we stay expert at that and kind of retain the leadership position of that, then I think we take any challenge that comes our way and pivot where we need to reach fans wherever they go, right?
Yeah.
So it's for us, long story short, I feel like whether it's social, whether it's digital, whether it's linear, we're going to be there with ESPN Deportes.
Yeah. Well, you do have the engine to do all of this, which is nice. But you also, I think they have the right man because you certainly know your stuff, and it's so I will ask you a couple more questions, let you go because I know you're a busy guy. One question is, and I loved your intro, when you said about where you went to school and hard work, you threw that in as well. And if I'm assuming you're a hiring manager, or you have say in some people that you're hiring for your team. What would you tell a young person, whether they're in grad school or undergrad, or what would your advice be to them if they wanted to get their foot in the door with you or with Deportes or ESPN in general?
I mean, I think ultimately what I always suggest for everyone who's passionate about sports, media, whatever it is that they do whatever they can with what's available to them. So if you're at school and there's either like a newspaper or some type of like media, like television, like go do that. Be part of that. If there's a media club, be part of that. Like make sure that you are maximizing all of the tools and opportunities that are surrounding you immediately before you start thinking about all the other big picture kind of things you can do. Why? Because as I found, those are just stepping stones from a networking standpoint. They're stepping stones from a knowledge perspective. Like the more you know, the more valuable you will be, especially early on in your career. You're never going to have like financial knowledge, the audience like expertise, right? Like you're starting from a place where people are looking for someone who's got gumption, the ability to learn, the ability to adapt, and then passion, right? And so if you can show that you have that passion by being involved in things immediately around you, I always think that's the first step.
Oh, these are great answers. I just want to share one thing. You know, it looks like getting back to the Mets for a second. We're becoming the Yankees across the bridge because we got Luis Severino now and now Harrison Bader. So it's like we're signing
Your
on.
owner is more Steinbrenner than our owner is. I feel like he's got like the old George Steinbrenner kind of like point of view of like, let's just buy people that we can to get better. So
Yeah,
I feel like the Mets, I feel like they're definitely more relevant than they have been for a couple of years. And
yeah.
be
Well, we'll
good if
see.
both teams are good again. It's been a while.
Yeah, that's always good, right? When there's something when September and October are fun around here, there's nothing like it, I think, in baseball. But Freddie, if you don't mind, and I'm not pandering, but if you want to say something in Spanish, you know, because this is Latin business today, I apologize. I should be able to speak the language. I don't. But if you want to say something to our Spanish speaking folks about Deportes, please do.
Ah, para que están siguiéndonos en español, perdón que no empezamos o hablamos en español hasta ahora, pero gracias por el apoyo para ESPN Deportes y ah, síganos en los próximos años también. All
Awesome,
good.
dude. Appreciate it. And you have a happy new year. Great. Nothing but the best for 2024. Congratulations on the 20th anniversary and on your success there with ESPN and ESPN Deportes.
All right, Dave. Thanks. Great meeting you. Look forward to talking in the future.
Back at you.